Welcome to the Alts Podcast. This is not another podcast about the stock market. Instead, we focus on the rapidly evolving world of alts. The goal of this podcast is to provide original research and insights that empowers you to become a better alternative investor. With each episode, we hope to bring you along with us as we learn together. Thanks for joining. Now let's dive in. Opinions expressed on this podcast by the hosts and podcast guests are for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Podcast hosts and guests may maintain positions in the offerings discussed in this podcast.
Hi, I'm Horacio Ruiz, host of the Alts Podcast. On today's episode, you'll hear from Evan Vandenberg, co-founder and CEO of Dibbs, the only 24/7 platform for buying and selling fractional shares of sports cards. Justin talks about why using blockchain technology in the sports card industry makes sense, the advantages of buying and selling on Dibbs, and his general thoughts on the sports card industry. He'll also share some insights on bringing in Amazon, yes, Amazon, as an investor. You'll also hear us talk about F1, and for our international listeners, why is it so popular? Let's go. All right, happy to have Evan Vandenberg here with us. He's the CEO and co-founder of Dibbs. Some big news has just come out about a week ago with Dibbs, and looking forward to the chat with Evan. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Evan, now, for those listeners that aren't very kind of familiar or are still kind of exploring the different card marketplaces, could you describe kind of what Dibbs is and how you kind of set it up that maybe is different from the other marketplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So cards is obviously what we've kind of been known for up to date. But, at the core of what we do is we take physical collectibles, we tokenize them. So we vault, insure, and then tokenize them with all the required metadata for that NFT to be returned for the physical item. Once a physical collectible is tokenized, it's an NFT at this point. We lock it in smart contracts and we issue fractional interest out of those smart contracts. And that's what's trading on Dibbs. Those fractional interests can be put together in a couple of unique ways, and people can take back the entire asset. And that's kind of like the core of the business. I mean, in terms of where we differentiate ourselves, we're the only blockchain-based business doing this. So we leverage tokenization in terms of title transfer and how we kind of manage our system. And the other side is that we're a two-sided marketplace in the fractional space. And I think to date, that's kind of the first one.
I know you have a background. I know you used to be the director of business development at Wax, right? Which is basically the second largest NFT marketplace in the world. What makes the fractionalization, the tokenization of these physical collectibles different from, say, buying a share?
Yeah, a couple things to unpack there. I mean, I can go into my background, but in terms of let's just get down kind of the nuts and bolts, right? Like, what's different about it? Why does it matter, right? Like, why is tokenization interesting, versus shares, right? There's a handful of reasons, right? But for us, we really believe that tokenization of physical assets, right, gives just an insane amount of utility on top of that. And maybe it doesn't seem as obvious at surface level, so we'll kind of go into that. But once, an item's tokenized, right, sure, we're happy to tokenize it. You can sell it on Dibbs, fractionally and ultimately in whole card or asset form. But ultimately, we want to build all sorts of interesting utility on top of that. We want you to be able to take these items, bring them into whatever digital ecosystems you want, right? We want businesses to be able to build on top of Dibbs. We want you to be able to send in your own items, have them tokenized, brought into a digital world where you can showcase them, collect, transact, whatever it may be that you want to do. And there's just this kind of whole world evolving in that space, right? Versus, a more walled garden approach, which would be kind of like shares, right? Where you go to one site, you go there, that's the only place you can transact. It's a little bit more straightforward, maybe a little bit easier for people to understand at the beginning. But I do believe that long term, the tokenization of physical collectibles is just wildly interesting.
I could definitely see a utility behind it, right? If you hold a certain number of tokens or a certain percentage of a collectible, maybe you can display it or something, or you could show it off. I don't know, but the space is so new, right? That we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's multi-pronged, right? There's the fact that you can take to all sorts of different marketplaces. You can transact in different cryptocurrencies. You have access to a much wider audience, right? I mean, whether or not it's Dibbs or another platform, right? There's still a lot of interesting things you can do just on the kind of buying and selling front. To take things a step further, right? From a community and access standpoint, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface, like you had mentioned. Getting opportunities and different privileges within the application or getting different NFTs and other things sent to you. That you can utilize in different ways, access different communities, ways that you can share these things in different ecosystems on social platforms that already exist in a much more meaningful and verified and authentic way, right? Twitter and a lot of the social platforms, that blue check mark, right? Whether or not you like it, it does actually help do a pretty good job of authenticating who that human being is behind the handle, right? Certainly when they're public figures. And I think, in the physical world, we also have analogs that are pretty interesting as well, right? You have PSA grading, and so this thing is real, it's authentic, it's in this quality. And I think blending those two things and bringing them into a digital world is really important, especially with the amount of time people are spending in their digital worlds, and their digital persona is becoming more and more valuable to them.
Absolutely. I think that the tokenization of your platform, the collectibles on your platform, and kind of this 24/7 trading on your platform as well has caught the attention of a lot of people. It's amazing that you guys have been around, like maybe officially, I guess, for a little over a year, but already you guys have created a partnership with Amazon. Can you talk about this latest, like Amazon investing in Dibbs? Because from what I understand, Amazon isn't really involved in the trading card space. And so them investing in you guys is a pretty big deal considering how huge they are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't go into deal specifics and some of the kind of behind, discussions that we've had, but just broad strokes, right? I mean, it was great to be able to align ourselves with somebody like Amazon. I think it's interesting on more fronts than probably meet the eye, right? I mean, obviously they're in a massive marketplace, huge e-commerce business, but they also have an incredible media empire, right? I mean, it's one of the most valuable media companies in the world with very few in the same kind of category. And I think they've got interesting plans on that front as well. And I think there's just so many synergies about what we were trying to do with our business and kind of how they were viewing the space. But it was really cool to be, one of or the first. I'm not exactly sure, but collectible and blockchain play in the NFT space. So having them, in our corner is obviously a big vote of confidence. And I think it's going to open up a lot of different avenues for us to explore together.
You mentioned the media presence that Amazon has. You're right about that. I mean, are we talking about a Dibbs, reality TV show?
Dibbs reality TV show? Who knows, man? That's certainly nothing I've actually thought about. But a day in the life of Dibbs, that would be cool. Look, they've got a lot of sports streaming properties. They've got Amazon Prime Video. They've got all sorts of things that they're working on. I think integrated kind of simulcasting of different things is really an interesting play. You got all sorts of fandom, right? That ties into media. It's almost kind of the genesis for a lot of fandom, right? Certainly in this day and age. And so I think, being able to kind of harness that and have real-time experiences could be very interesting. Again, I don't speak for them and certainly wouldn't claim to, but they've definitely got an unbelievable audience there. I think, they're looking at this space and others and just happy to be in the room.
Yeah. And to be clear, because there's some headlines out there, to be clear, it's not an acquisition, right? You guys have not been acquired by Amazon. They've simply invested in your platform.
Yeah, correct. We don't want to be acquired right now, man. We've got big plans. We want to do a lot of interesting things. We felt like, taking an investment and trying to find really interesting ways of doing stuff together is the best path for the business.
Yeah. And one of the press releases you mentioned expanding a little bit more. I know today was a big day as well, expanding into Pokemon cards and Magic cards and other non-trading products. Could you maybe give us some insight into what those non-sports card products could be?
Yeah, I mean, the timing couldn't be better on that front, right? We did our first Pokemon drop today, did a PSA 10 Charizard first edition. This thing sold out pretty quickly. Got a couple of other Pokemon cards in the hopper here. But I think, just to speak to the broader kind of vertical expansion play, I think, we want to be where fans are, right? And where people's passions are. And I think sports is such a massive beacon of all of that. But there's also just a ton of other areas, right? I think, the Pokemon sports card collecting worlds, they certainly overlap, but they're also very, distinct. And I think you can access just a much broader audience, especially when you start looking at the globe. American sports are obviously, global now and are becoming more and more global, but there's things that are very particular to different geos. And, we want to make sure that we can bring people what they want and make sure that we bridge that kind of physical to digital gap and bring fans and collectors alike the things that they want to buy, own, and showcase.
And Amazon's definitely a gateway for that, I would imagine. Right now, are you guys currently limited? Like if somebody, say in South America or in Africa or Europe wants to use your platform, could they?
Not today. No, it's US only. Obviously something that we would love to grow into, a bunch of different countries. I think we've got tens of thousands of waitlist signups currently from all sorts of different countries, largely Europe, LATAM. There's a fair amount, parts of Asia as well, Australia disproportionately, Canada and Australia. So the interest is there, right? It's a matter of making sure that we do it right. that we do it in a way that satisfies, regulatory requirements and everything else. And that we're in a position to really grow and do that. So I think one step at a time.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only imagine like America is so sports crazy, but I mean, it pales in comparison, right, to like Europe in soccer and really the whole globe in soccer. And then all these other sports, like emerging sports that have been popular around the globe forever. And they're just catching on now in the United States, like F1. I know that in other parts of the world, rugby is a big deal, cricket. Like you said, I mean, the possibilities are like almost endless, right? You can continue talking and expanding to different markets.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, soccer is obviously a huge and kind of like obvious one. F1 is growing, rapidly here. I think it's been a big thing in a lot of other countries. And we did a Lewis Hamilton drop and it was sold out in minutes last week. So, I mean, UFC, there's all sorts of things that are really global. I think soccer is truly, even within the United States, a mass, you can look at any report, right? Soccer is one of the fastest growing verticals for collectibles on the planet. Things will emerge and there's all types of fandom, right? It extends past sports. I mean, Pokemon's an obvious example where you get a global audience for, maybe they're not even interested in sports, right? And you start to bring people who are in different verticals and just making sure they have the right product in place, that people are getting what they want and that the platform supports these things in a meaningful way and not just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah. Would be so interested in find out like what kind of access to the sports card other people around the world have.
Very minimal.
Very minimal. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's super small percentage, when you think about like sheer numbers, right? The US just dominates that industry right now. And it's just so much more accessible to US citizens. So I think globally and instant collecting of cards is a really cool business proposition.
The second big news you guys came out with last week was, I guess, an initiative called Sell with Dibbs, where you give potential users the opportunity to fractionalize their own cards on your marketplace. That's also really cool. I mean, are there any barriers there to entry? I mean, what kind of cards are we talking about, in terms of price range? Do the cards have to be graded? And how would someone go about doing that? Like, how would someone contact you and say, hey, I want to fractionalize my card on your platform?
Great question. So yeah, in terms of limitations, like everything has to be graded. I think right now we're focusing on cards that we actually have, existing markets for. So if we have a PSA 10 Charizard, if you have another PSA 10 First Edition Charizard, that's a really easy, simple add. We're looking at all sorts of things outside of, current things we offer. And we just have to kind of evaluate those right now. Ultimately, we want to kind of let that system kind of run itself and let people bring on whatever they want. So it's just kind of building towards that. But right now, it's all online. You can just go on the website and go through the process, submit a form. Team will be reaching out to you. It's all free for the user. So no fees in terms of storage, shipping, insurance, vaulting, all of that. And then we will go ahead and put that in your account.
And then it's open for trading, and you can kind of ride that ebb and flow, right, of an athlete, a market, whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
In terms of the grading of the cards, I'm curious. Most of your cards are PSA. What are the grading companies? Are you limited to certain grading companies? Is there a preference?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been, BGS and PSA. So Beckett and Collectors Universe or PSA, they're graded entity. But yeah, I think, preference, I mean, for us, it's always been really simple to, leverage the PSA system, the 1 through 10 system. It's very well recognized and understood. Certainly in the collecting world, it's a little bit easier to explain to people new to the hobby as well. But, I think we're relatively agnostic on that front. And then as we step into other verticals, obviously there's different authentication mechanisms and grading agencies that will need to be established and or, kind of found and worked with.
Let's get into the platform, because I find that the 24/7 trading is so interesting, right? It's almost like a real-time stock market that just doesn't, close. And so you can have, I would imagine you have, swings at all times of the day. Do you find that on the marketplace, let's say it's a Steph Curry, right? And he goes off for 50 points one night, or he breaks the record like he did the other night for 3 points made, that there, that momentum, right? That news of him achieving something historic kind of creates a bounce in the price, so that then you can have like these traders that are almost like day traders, right? Within the stock market.
Yeah, I mean, it's less day trading, I think, but there's certainly people who love to like buy and sell things, based on like that week's games and try to kind of like play that angle. It's a bit of a dicey game, right? I mean, from a macro perspective, right? I mean, player performance, player achievements are kind of what drive this industry, right? I mean, Steph obviously setting the 3-point record. I think Steph's been the most traded card for the last couple of weeks. So most traded player on the platform. So yeah, I mean, it totally follows the moment, right? And it's a very, living, breathing, organic marketplace where absolutely when things are in season, you're seeing trends of like, those are the higher volumes in terms of people's activity. time spent on the pages. So like definitely we're seeing that. I think it's always existed, right? Even if you look at kind of like the traditional eBay and auction format of buying and selling cards, this is just kind of under a microscope, right? And kind of on steroids where you can watch it live, and really you reduce that shipping step, all the kind of like potential fraud and other things that happen in between buying and selling a card, and you make it very simple. People definitely behave differently, right? And I think in a really interesting way, right? They have this very, very real-time way of interacting and capturing, their kind of like fandom and insights in the players they love.
I almost feel like having it open like 24/7, and that mirrors you being on the blockchain, right? It mirrors the crypto market, right? Where it never ends. You could buy Bitcoin or Ethereum, anything at anytime you want. I wouldn't say that the crypto market is stable, but it definitely gives you like a good idea of what the price is, right? Because it's going, you have way more data points, I guess. And it's so quick to react to the news that it doesn't have to wait for the market to open, and it reacts instantly to whatever happens, right? So I really like that. I also like on your platform, I'm just kind of looking at it, the reference you have to card ladder and being able to reference like, hey, this card has an average of this over this many sales, so that people can have a really good idea of exactly what price point they're investing in or what price point they're selling off at. Could you talk a little bit about the platform and how you've developed it for the users to kind of navigate and how they can benefit from it?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, right. I mean, what we want to make is the simplest, easy, and most transparent process, right? And I think, is really crucial to be able to pull in external third-party data, right? Where, it's not just ours, like it's any registered sale that, goes through their system that we're able to show people like, hey, here's kind of like what's going on, right? And, whether you like it or not, right? Like this is the facts of what's going on in the industry, and make sure that people are, educated, right? And for people who are maybe not huge card, buyers on eBay, right? That they have some semblance of, what's going on in the world externally from Dibbs and can make the best decisions for themselves. So I think, we've really tried to kind of emphasize that and make sure that, we've got different user experience and user interface tweaks that are obviously coming out and constantly evolving to really kind of streamline the process for people who are A, new to the hobby, and B, for those that have been around for forever, right? And they're very familiar, right? And you have to kind of cater to both. But I think that, it all kind of boils down to making it the most fun, kind of easy experience for getting involved and participating in that marketplace. And then, the second piece is just making sure that they have as much data as possible and that they're as well informed as you can make them, right? People obviously make their own decisions and all of that, but we felt like it was important to showcase that data where possible.
Yeah. Just curious, how many ways can you invest on the platform? Like can you invest in an individual card, right? Obviously you can buy a part of the card. Can you invest in all the athletes' cards on your platform? And can you invest like on just even on a league? Like, hey, I want to throw in $1,000 into all the NBA cards in your platform just because I think the NBA is going to, it's going to go up or whatever the case might be. How many different ways can you invest?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, and invest is a strong word, right? I think like, people buy and sell for all sorts of reasons, but, in terms of, transacting on the platform, there's kind of two primary ways of doing that, right? And there's individual cards, individual collectibles as we expand, but that's, I think a little bit more straightforward for the user, right? It's like, hey, if you want to buy this particular card, here's the marketplace for that. But then what we did, in addition to that is we created player collections. So for, we could use Steph Curry as an example. I think we have, 5 to 10 of his cards, right, on the platform right now. For people who just love Steph and want to buy a piece of all of Steph's stuff, right, they can, in fact, take $100 and buy the Steph collection. And so they can just put, we basically, it's a spot marketplace. So we fill orders across all those different cards. And you can, buy a piece of every card of Steph's in the collection. We don't have the capability of doing it on the league level or anything like that yet, but it's an interesting idea. It's certainly technically simple from our perspective. It just, it could be really interesting. I think we just got to be, conscientious of what that would do to the marketplace. And it's certainly something we've thought about, broadening that from, player to even like team, right? I mean, there's all sorts of kind of ways to slice and dice that data. But when it's, when you have it fractionalized and you don't have it in different format, it's really easy to create very interesting matrices of being able to simplify that buying process across, multiple things. Yeah,
it's so cool. I mean, just the fact that you can, in one transaction, right, go ahead and invest, across 5-6 different cards. I think that idea is real cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Let's go back. Like I always usually start with the history of the company, the why, right? Like why trading cards, why fractionalization, and I alluded to it in the back. You have a background in the blockchain, working as director of development for Wax. But really, what I'm more interested in is why trading cards. Like what was it about this industry and how you went about creating your company that said, you know what, I got to do this. I gotta try my hand at this.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a process of like the story will probably make a little bit more sense, but was working at Wax, was launching their blockchain, right? Brought in Topps as one of our early partners. Obviously collected a bunch of Topps cards growing up. So it was super cool being able to go back and forth to New York. They were really forward thinking in terms of, being the first in that collectible space to really materially go after the blockchain side of things. And so we did their first NFT launches. And in that process, I started getting back into cards. And, I'd been in both myself and some of our core kind of like early engineers and team members had been in the digital item trading space, even pre-blockchain, right? So like in-game items and secondary markets around those. And then certainly very, very early NFT projects. And so we saw the technology, we realized that it would be extremely useful for a few things, right? It's funny because today, people kind of associate the technology like non-fungible tokens and that concept with, some of these like profile picture and JPEGs and kind of like this piece of art, right? But like underlying those kind of like end user experiences is this really interesting technology, right? And it's this decentralized kind of almost like a computer in and of itself that like you can actually really program some interesting stuff around, title transfer and ownership. And we felt like, I was diving back into cards and just watching the whole process, and then ultimately having security deposit boxes and vaults and all these things. I was like, wait, this doesn't need to be done like this. Like there is a much simpler way of doing this for a lot of different use cases. And so cards, were a personal affinity, right? I mean, love them growing up. They're also just a very, very unique collectible in the sense of it's an extremely understood and kind of like liquid market, I would say, versus a lot of other collectibles like, fine art and other things. They have a very, solid grading system and authentication system that's, based on a numerical 1 through 10 system. All this stuff is really appealing for a testing ground, right? But I think, ultimately where we wanted the company to go was to really bridge that physical digital divide and make a simple way for people to bring these things in, to these new spaces that they're occupying on their phones and on their computers, more often than they're interacting with people in real life, right? And so I think at the core of, the mission of the business and where we want to take it is in that direction, right? And we kind of started with like the hardest thing, which is, decentralized fractional physical items, right? But I think, ultimately that can even be simplified and take things into a non-fractional context. And you can send your whole collection in, you could have it digitized. And if you want to have it back, totally up to you, right? But there's so much things you can do with it in the interim. And if you want to fractionalize it and sell some of it and buy something else, like that's an option. If you want to do, ultimately the platform will be much more integrated with different social and community kind of environments, certainly with some more gamification and kind of fun things for people to participate and showcase this stuff in a very different way. And so that was really important to us. I think, where we started and the evolution of the business are kind of two separate things. I think cards is a really interesting testing ground, like I mentioned. And then ultimately, I think we can go in all sorts of directions with it. And I think, that was interesting to a lot of our, investors, to our employees, and to, Amazon and others.
Now that you're in the weeds, right? You've developed your company. Do you still have like a personal collection? Do you still have this passion for it? Are you still a collector, you find yourself, or you feel yourself like you got to remove yourself since you're so, involved in the business of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually buy and sell cards much less often now. I think for a multitude of reasons. I mean, primarily just simply like my time is unbelievably disproportionately spent, building this business and everything that comes with it, which has been, the joy of my professional life. But I think in terms of me buying and selling cards, it's really decreased. There are things that I'll go seek out and try to go grab, but it has become fewer and far between. And I really, I feel like for myself, staying impartial to a lot of it is important. If I was out there, not that I have the funds to even compete on the big collector stage at all, but it just seems like, I want to avoid that. And I want to kind of stay a little bit on the sidelines for some of it and really kind of focus on building something that's interesting for the industry. So yes, I definitely have my own personal collection. but I would say it's decreased in terms of me being a part of the kind of day-to-day, scouring eBay.
For sure. Just so the audience knows, you have like a favorite card? You have anything that you PC?
I'm a big Steph and Clay fan. So anything more, I was living in the Bay Area from high school onward. And until recently I moved to LA. But yeah, anything Warriors, you have my attention.
Definitely. Yeah. The Warriors ruled down there in the Bay Area for sure. You created your company at the right moment. You captured that momentum and it's still going. How different is it now? Like I would say, a year and change later, as opposed to when you first started. The momentum has changed. That kind of that cool down is maybe beginning, or it's just different. And also, like, do you see that collectors or their collections are in some ways different? Are people looking more to sell or as opposed to buy?
It's all happened so fast. That's the one thing I could say. Like even this morning, we were having our company all hands, and I was talking to my co-founder, and it used to be him, me, and a handful of people around a kitchen table, right? And Zoom. He's in Europe, and now all of a sudden, we fill up two full gallery mode views on Zoom, right? I think it's 40 plus people now, and just seeing that evolution and seeing the kind of growth of so many of the folks that we brought in and ourselves to some degree has just been awesome. I feel like it's all like the momentum's just kind of always just been building and growing. I feel like it's more exciting today than it was the day we launched. Like the whole thing just keeps getting more and more interesting. You get more and more, resources and humans around the table that can just do so many crazy cool things. And watching that and being able to kind of take a step back and look at things from a more strategic level has been fun, right? As opposed to being so in the weeds in the beginning. It was just, 2-3 of us bootstrapping this thing for months and months and, hoping we can figure it out. And then, some people taking a chance on us on the investment front in 2020. And then, obviously that getting accelerated here this year. And it's been an incredible journey so far, man. And it feels like it's just getting started. You
mentioned that your investors, you got some pretty big names. You got Amazon, but, you also have Nat Turner, and then you also have a legion of athletes, right? For some reason, the name that stands out to me, just because I respect his game from college and whatnot, was Kevin Love, is one of your investors, part of that investment group. What's it like to have these athletes as, these early investors in your company? Is that any different than just having any other angel investors?
Yeah, it is in many ways, and it isn't in some, right? At the end of the day, it's just it's human beings that give you the vote of confidence, believe in you, and support that financially. But yeah, look, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say it was really cool. I've been a big fan of a lot of these people for a long time, and to have them as partners on this is super cool. And I think one of the big kind of pushes for us in 2022 is to also start leveraging that a bit more, right? And they have some really interesting collecting stories. They're genuinely passionate about the space. They come from all sorts of walks of life, but been incredibly kind and fun to work with so far. And I think expect a fair amount of trying to engage them and mix them into content and events and all sorts of things come 2022. I think we've been pretty mellow on it so far, and I think from both sides there's a ton of interest in doing something, right? The space on multiple fronts is blowing up, and they're big fans of it. Big collectors themselves, a lot of them. And so, yeah, it's super cool. And it's just an honor to even have that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, it opens up these other opportunities for everybody. What are the trends right now that you're noticing? We're in the middle of the basketball season. We're kind of ending the regular season for the NFL. But beyond that, right? Any trends in the trading card space? I want to talk to you about Pokemon today. You guys, those are your first three drops. Your first three Pokemon drops, correct? Today?
Correct. Yeah. Just a couple hours ago. I think we did it about 2 hours ago.
What was that decision like? I know that Pokemon had its moment, and then some would say that it's kind of crashed a little bit. But what's that decision behind going into these other markets beyond sports?
It's just been so requested, right? We do a ton of user interviews and try to engage with our community in a bunch of different ways via Discord, direct messaging, all sorts of things, email. And just it's been a constant level of feedback of, hey, we really we wish we could get some access to Pokemon cards on here too. That would be awesome. So let's give the people what they want. And I grew up in that era that was right in the sweet spot of first edition Pokemon. So for me, it was cool too. And it's actually very easy for me to relate to and to kind of bring to the table. But yeah, the decision was, all right, we built this infrastructure, right? It works for sports cards. It absolutely can work for any sort of graded card and really for almost anything you can think of in the collectible space. So, let's start to see what people want and give them that.
Yeah, you know what's crazy in terms of demand, you have more PGA cards than you have NHL cards, which I find kind of interesting, right? Like that fourth major league in the United States, that some would consider maybe the fifth behind MLS at this point. But I know, for example, NHL just is back on ESPN, right? And I always thought that might be a major mover for the organization. Anything that's come across your way, or you're not, or you just haven't had the opportunity to put an NHL card on your platform.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the guys who runs our kind of inventory squad is probably going to be like, I told you. Yeah, and NHL's common. I've been lucky enough we've had some offers to sell some really cool stuff on our platform from people from the NHL, some really preeminent, awesome stuff, some Gretzky stuff in there, Crosby, Ovechkin, some really cool cards that I would love to get out there. It's just been, timing and making sure we do that at the right time. But, hockey season's obviously in full swing. So yeah, I'm sure once he hears this, I'll be getting an email. So thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, that, and also, like you said, F1, right? F1 is something where you see it, right? You see the excitement behind it. You had that huge race in Austin. I know that they're going to be in Miami next year. There's so much momentum there, right? And it's almost like you got to be careful, right, between spotting a fad from a trend. I wonder how much of that thinking goes into a company like yours.
Yeah, and it's evolving, right? I think our thought process on is we've got a data science team. We look at a lot of things. But ultimately, right, like we can't predict where the world's going, right? Like we can't always just say, okay, this is what it's going to be. And I think that's part of being a two-sided marketplace, is letting people determine that for themselves, right? So if you want to bring that onto the platform, you want to sell that particular vertical, like by all means, right? Like I think, at some point in 2022, it's going to be very, very open and allow for a lot of different verticals. I think, when we look at it from our own lens, I mean, F1 was, again, a lot of community driven responses. It was people on the platform being like, we want F1. And I think, personally started watching the Netflix series a couple years back, hadn't really thought deeply about F1 at all, prior to that. So I can thank Netflix for like reinvigorating, my level of interest. And it's an interesting sport, right? I actually think it works. Like whether or not it ends up being the best like card vertical, or a great card vertical, I have no genie lamp here, but I think it's interesting, right? Because you have 20 people, right, at the top level at any given point in time, and that may seem as a negative for some, but like in terms of what we see is the top 20 players in each sport tend to be the ones that people interact with the most on our platform. So when you look at F1, right, you even have that under a microscope where every single Formula One racer is actually pretty important to the overall scheme, right? They're relevant, and you don't get some defensive lineman, who's drafted in the 6th round in a pack, right? You're actually, you tend to get, and they have multiple tiers to it all, right? But you do get somebody that a lot of people tend to like care about, and so I think from a global scale, it's also very interesting. But even just US alone, I think the growth has been explosive. I don't know what to like attribute it all to, frankly. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on it. But I have to assume that Netflix series helped. I think they've done a really good job of marketing them. The fact that this whole season came down to one race, and obviously there's a lot of scrutiny around how that all ended and how Verstappen won, but it still was story worthy, right? And it's capturing a lot of people. And you see these races and just like, it's such like a kind of a cool scene. Like it's become, on my sports bucket list, like going to Monaco, like that would be a lot of fun. That's very high up there for me. I think unless something serious happens, I'll be at the next F1 event in the US just because I'd like to go to one.
Yeah, that's totally cool, right? And you're seeing these jet engines, right, going across. And my counter argument is this, as it relates to sports cars, right? The US has had its F1, it's NASCAR. And like, if you talk about like leagues, like NASCAR was like number 2 at some point behind the NFL. I know it's kind of decreased a little bit. You had that loyalty. Like you had Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon. If you were a Jeff Gordon fan, right, you wouldn't be caught dead holding a Coke, right? You were a total Pepsi fan. The fans behind every single driver was so loyal to their brands. Whatever sticker was on that car, they were out there buying it. And it just seems to me, and maybe I'm not aware, the trading card space hasn't caught on. Like, yeah, you can get a couple cool Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt cards for, a couple $100, maybe a couple $1,000, but nothing like what you're seeing with Lewis Hamilton, right? And so I'm wondering, what is this F1 phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, I think you, me, and a lot of other people were trying to figure that out, right? Is what's really driving it. I'm sure there's somebody far more educated on the subject than me, but as it pertains to like NASCAR and NHRA, but on NASCAR, right? I'm not like personally, I don't find myself watching a ton of NASCAR, but like it's not lost on me that a huge portion of the country and the viewership, it certainly was off the charts, right? And the fan loyalty, the brand loyalty was insane, like you had mentioned. So I agree with you. Like that seems like a missed opportunity, right? Because there's so many big collectors in those demos, right? I mean, I was just literally looking at a huge collection. Somebody was trying to get rid of a massive collection in South Carolina. I actually flew out there when I was in Florida before I came home, and so much NASCAR unopened wax that he had. And I was like, this has got to be interesting or cool. And like doing a little research, like the value there isn't a ton of value there right now. And I don't know why. And I couldn't point at it. Maybe it just, maybe it was on the card, the manufacturers themselves not really marketing or branding it correctly or pushing to the right audience. I have no idea, man. You probably know more than I do.
Yeah. The NASCAR phenomenon is awesome. It obviously has roots in the South and, and kind of, this whole idea of moonshining, and kind of taking the back roads and using these race cars essentially to take whiskey across state lines. So it's got that kind of that story, that legend behind it, but it's almost like it's been, maybe a regional thing. I don't know. Even though you have NASCAR tracks all over the country, and so relating it back to F1, I just wonder, maybe F1 is just happens to be able to market itself better and in a more glamorous way, right?
It's like the most like elite sport ever, right? I mean, you can't just like go get an F1 car. Not that you can go buy a NASCAR either, right? But like it's like the billionaires, who's who, in attendance, the global kind of like movers and shakers that are, backing a lot of these orgs. And it just is such a glamorous sport. And at least the way they've marketed it. And I think they did an excellent job again with their series they launched in the US, kind of broadening their scope here. And just like, I think it kind of gives everybody that like, oh man, like this fancy kind of like international vibe. And again, it's hard for me to understand why in the US, at least the US card market, why NASCAR didn't pick up more in retrospect now that we're talking about it, because F1 clearly is taking off. And it doesn't seem like, the US really doesn't have many participants as far as drivers are concerned or teams and all of that, right? I mean, we're really kind of on the sidelines in many respects. I don't know.
On your end, if that demand's there, right, you have to meet it. Lewis Hamilton seems to be the torchbearer right now. I kind of wanted to, go back, just to respect your time, going back to like the platform and, for anybody that wants to check out Dibbs and has maybe these sports cards that they want to see how they stack up right to what you have online. What kind of trading is involved, right? Because I saw like some buying and trading, and I saw like a very, very minimal buy-in, like where somebody was buying like 0.6% or something like that. Is there a minimum or a maximum on the transaction? Don't you have to have a certain minimum so that there's a transaction fee that you guys have to recoup?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, we don't really have to have a minimum. I think, for us right now, I think on the buy side, the minimum's $1. And then on the sell side, I think there's exceptions because if you have less than $1, like we're not going to like hold your money, right? So if you want to sell into an order that's there, like you can definitely partially fill. So yeah, I think, you can do as little or as much as you want, right? It goes down to $1. I mean, the whole kind of concept there was we wanted to make this accessible for anyone, right? Anybody who's, 18 in the US for right now, but ultimately we want, like, if you look at like, golden auctions, like they run incredible auctions, right? But like how many people can truly participate meaningfully in a lot of them, right? And I think, when you look at different groups of people and people certainly that are new to the space, right? Like getting your toes wet with a few dollars is a much different ask than putting $10,000 into a single purchase. Allows people to buy into a bunch of different things too, right? So they can really check out a bunch, learn more about the industry. Like we really do think it's a great gateway to get people into the hobby, and certainly the younger generations that haven't been to card shows, and certainly the ones in the last couple of years that learned about the hobby but haven't actually been able to like join in a meaningful way, right? I mean, we were at the National and tons of people were there, right? Regardless of some of the COVID concerns, which is interesting to see too, right? Like, it's not the youngest group, right? It's not, it's a lot of people from all kind of walks of life. But yeah, I mean, we really wanted to make sure that, you can grab your phone and if you have some sort of insight or something you want to do, you can act on it. You don't have to have, a $1 billion budget or $1 million budget or $1,000 budget for that matter. And you can get involved and start to like participate. And so that was really, really important to us.
What do you see with the industry. Obviously, you see it growing. To me, if a company like Amazon is investing in Dibbs, right? That means that the higher powers know what they're doing, right? They see a bright future for the industry. Do you share the same thing? And I mean, are you 100% bullish, or are there some things that you've kind of seen now that you've been in the business for a couple of years now that, that makes me think twice?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to grow. I really, truly, in my bones, believe that. I think there's a lot of smarter people than myself that have come to the same conclusion and have financially put their money where their mouth is too, right? Making those investments and spending the time to care about it, right? And I think, from it being, it's never, I would call it cottage industry a few years ago, it's just not the case. But I think it's going to expand rapidly. I think it's going to become a much more quintessential part of being a fan of whatever it may be. I mean, NFTs, we've kind of accelerated that in different walks of life, for better or worse, right? And when we, if we want to talk about cards specifically, there's something really special about that, right? When you look at the digital stuff and this evolution, right, there's going to be a lot more misses there, right? It's going to be a lot of things that are nonsense, right? Or go to zero very quickly, and there isn't, much interest and value after, a very quick period of time. Where I think, cards, we're looking at 100 plus years of value there and of passion and people who care about these things, right? And so I think the physical stuff is always going to be interesting to people. You're seeing this rise amongst the physical collectibles in more than just cards. And I think cards are only going to grow. I mean, Fanatics coming in and the valuations, amount of money they're bringing into the space is really interesting to see, right? And I don't know what their plans are. I don't know them personally, but I think it points in the direction of they're going to be working with the players, the leagues, to bring this stuff to a lot more people. And I think if you take a step back and, like obviously people have affinity for the brands that are producing things today and that they're used to collecting, but like it's good to get new blood every once in a while, right? And I think it's great to get new ideas and new concepts into that space. And I think, you're starting to see that. I think people are taking it extremely seriously. So my fear about the whole industry isn't so much about where holistically that it's going in the right direction, like in terms of like it's growing, but like individually, when you look at different particular verticals and sectors, like, yeah, there's cause for concern, right? I mean, the amount of money that we're being put on modern young players, that it just like, if you look at it, right, I don't have to like explain to you, it was kind of crazy to see, right? If you juxtaposed it to a legitimate Hall of Famer, clearly lower pops, right? And all these other things. And the price differentials there were just kind of inexplicable as far as I was concerned. But, that happens in all sorts of markets, right? Things heat up and people get overzealous. And unfortunately, I'm sure there will be cases of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as the industry grows and as people get interested, and I don't know if this is a part of any of these, mega deals being constructed, but to your point, I think the education, right? And I was joking, I guess, a little bit when I mentioned like a Dibbs reality TV show, but if you do it right, like following your team, following you, doing certain acquisitions, if you're a potential buyer, right? Let's say collector, you can learn a lot from somebody who's in the industry, right? You guys are doing this day and night, right? Like this is your job now. I just think things like that are important, right? Where you're not just necessarily glamorizing everything and saying, hey, I bought this for $1 million, sold it for $2 million, easy money. Because, the reality is, well, I can't buy the $1 million card, and I'm not gonna flip it for $2 million, a year later. And you're right, like people might legitimately be putting in their money in the wrong place, right?
Yeah, I don't like the easy money mentality. Look, it can work in short glimpses of time for people in different places, crypto, for instance, and other things. It's important to buy what you like, what you care about, what you believe in, what you want to be a part of, right? And yeah, the idea of just getting in and trying to make $1 million off flipping, like, look, maybe some people have done it. You never know, like believe half of what you hear and half what you see and none of what you hear, right? But yeah, I hope, right? My hope, and I know that a lot of this is going on now through conversations, is like there's going to be a lot more content and media strategy around this space, right? Like you're going to see series around this soon. Like this will be, I can with almost complete certainty tell you that there will be series around this. So you'll see Netflix or whoever it may be, the big players in the space, like they're taking this seriously, right? People care about this. Like it's, and I hope that we create content and like that the space, it starts to grow in a direction that like it is more informative and less about these stories, right? Like, of course, those stories are like captivating and eye-catching and all that, but like I really hope, it brings in more fans through really cool storytelling and higher quality, content and production around it. Because there's so much cool shit, right? There's just so much that you can talk about, and so many things are going to happen. And so I think there's a lot of cool storylines, and those are you're going to see that stuff come out in the next year or two.
I don't know if you felt this way. I mean, there's been a handful of times where I've seen certain cards, right? Even within my collection, right, where I get something and I bought it for $150, let's say, or $200, and I open the card and I almost get my breath gets taken away. I'm like, I own this, and it's kind of like a special hobby, special industry. Our time is basically up here. I don't want to take up more of your time. Is there anything else that you want to add? Like, what's next for Dibbs? What's next? Are you going to this? I know that the big industry event is going to be the Mint Collective in Vegas. Are you going to go to that?
Yeah, look, we're definitely gonna get way more involved on the event scene, right? This year, last year we were loosely, or, minimally involved and really just kind of heads down building technology. But like we feel like we owe it to the whole space to be more involved, to bring people up to speed on what we're doing, but like also to support the hobby as a whole. So yeah, we'll be at the Mint Collective in Vegas. I was actually just chatting with them yesterday in person. The guys running it. And so we'll be there. We'll definitely be at the national. We want to start, and I think like there's a consortia, businesses like our own, right, that are emerging in this space that like we want to create some cool, fun events, right? Like I was in New York for NFT.NYC, and like, holy shit, man, like that is like hate NFTs all you want, all that sort of like it doesn't matter. Like the energy was real, right? And like people love connecting over things they care about. Like this is look, it's no different, right? Card shows and card conferences are really, they're big events. And, we want to make sure that we're there to kind of support that and bring it into, this kind of new age and make sure we foster that well. So you can definitely count on seeing us at a lot of the big events this year and being a sponsor and certainly, having a presence and trying to make sure we get back to the community too and hosting events and trying to bring cool things to people's plate. Hopefully we'll do something interesting for the Super Bowl for folks that are in town and try to fly some folks out as well.
Awesome. Evan, it was great talking to you. It was great finding out more about Dibbs. It looks like the future's pretty bright.
Yeah, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for having me on. And dude, keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.